5 miles from the center of Berlin, it would focus the world's attention on Nazi Germany and its growing strength. It cost the equivalent of $250 million to build. 2 tiers of seating would hold 110,000 spectators, and Hitler's engineers were given just 3 years to complete it. Would the stadium be ready in time for the opening lavish ceremony? Hitler would not take no for an answer. An innovative solution was needed. It was decided to sink the floor of the stadium and place the lower seating tier below ground level.
Concrete construction was only needed for the upper tier, not for the lower tier.
This would drastically cut the construction time, but more than that, it echoed the design of the Roman arenas, which also had sunken floors. Meanwhile, Hitler continued to meddle in other aspects of the design. Werner March, the stadium's architect, had designed an ultra-modern glass facade for the building's front.
When Hitler saw these drawings, he got angry and he forced March to change the plans. He wanted no glass elements in the stadium.
Hitler wanted the building to have a classical design and ordered the facade be covered with stone.
Stone was really significant to Hitler because of its prestige, because of its permanence, and because of its use by previously powerful regimes.
The stadium was to be more than just a sports arena. It was to be a monument to the glory of Nazism. An opening was left in the stadium's west end, giving a direct line of sight to a bell tower, the Führer Tower. Its overshadowing presence would be a constant reminder of Hitler's all-consuming power. Throughout the games, his secret police used it as a vantage point from where to watch the crowds. When he attended in person, Hitler sat with his men in a VIP box, and he choreographed the opening ceremony. For the first time, a flaming torch was carried from Greece's Mount Olympus to light a beacon in the stadium. A ritual which continues today, a Nazi innovation. The athlete who carried that first torch through Berlin recalls the effect it had on the crowds.
The mood was fantastic, I can tell you that much. There were hundreds of people standing on the streets. I was thrilled. It was just an honor to run with this torch.
The Nazi message was clear. They were the natural successors to history's greatest civilizations. But not everything at the Games went to Hitler's plan. Although German athletes topped the medal table, the star of the 1936 Games was Jesse Owens, an African-American athlete.
Well, Jesse Owens was the hero amongst all the participants and the spectators. He was a personality who stood out from all the other athletes.
Hitler ignored the inconvenient fact that the hero of the Games was a man he thought racially inferior and called the Berlin Olympics a great victory for Nazism. Although the international community had threatened to boycott the Games, it was won over by the spectacle. The stadium had done its job. Hitler was delighted. Work was to start straight away on another stadium, the German Stadium, and it was to be even bigger.
The stadium was meant to be an even greater expression of Hitler's claims for world domination. Just as the world was going to be dominated by the political will of Germany, so too would other aspects of life, including sports, for example, be also centered in the new peacetime empire of a German-dominated world.
Hitler chose to build his new stadium in Nuremberg, site of his earlier triumphal rallies. This man-made lake marks the spot he chose. The only trace left of an attempt to build a stadium for 400,000 people.
Behind me was the original location of the German stadium. What remains of that is the hole dug for the foundation. This stadium was a building site at least up until the early stages of the war.
Engineer Ed McCann doubts that the building, as planned, would have been viable.
There's 400,000 people got to use this thing. They've got to get in and out. They've got to be organised so that they can get to their seats, be served with hot dogs, use toilets and all the rest of it. As the stadium gets bigger and bigger and bigger, the queue times get longer and longer and longer.
Speer was acutely aware of the scale of the challenge. The highest point of the stadium would be 300 feet above the arena floor, and although lifts were planned to take spectators, 100 at a time, to the top 3 tiers, engineers were concerned about visibility.
It was important for them to know, for example, whether you could see so far below from such a high stadium that had never been tried before.
That's the same thing that influences stadia design today. I mean, if you get too far away, there's simply no viewing experience whatsoever.
Speer's solution was to build a full-scale model of a section of the seating. By placing 60 workers in the top tier and checking their lines of sight, he could satisfy himself that a stadium of this size was viable. Construction could now begin. The stadium would cover 24,000 square feet, 4 times the size of the Olympic Stadium, and it would be finished with red granite, personally selected by Hitler. But his demands went far beyond what was available.
The granite itself for the German stadium required 4 times the yearly output of the entire German granite industry merely to cover its facade.
Hitler believed that once Germany had become the global power, every Olympic Games would be staged in his new stadium. But it was not to be. The project was suspended as the country's resources were diverted to war and weapons production. The site was abandoned, the foundations filled with water. Today, a lake is all that remains of Hitler's scheme to build the world's largest stadium. Computer-generated imagery shows what the completed stadium would have looked like. But to Hitler, this was just a side project. His main focus was always a new capital. He would tear down Berlin and replace it with his world capital, Germania. It would be his most ambitious project and the Nazis' greatest achievement. But Germania was never built. Deep in Berlin's state archives are clues to what Hitler's dream city would have looked like.
It's the same with all great dictators. They want to demonstrate their great power with architecture. And with Hitler, he wanted to show the world.
Blueprints reveal ambition on an extraordinary scale.
It was the visual tip of the iceberg for a very extensive restructuring of the entire social, political, and economic order.
Hitler detested Berlin and considered it decadent and depraved.
He pointed to Berlin as a city that was not emblematic of the power of a real Germany. Particularly, he talked about, for example, Jewish department stores as being a sign of sickness, architectural sickness, but also, of course, political sickness of the regime.
Although Hitler had been democratically elected leader by the German people, in fact, only 1 in 4 Berliners had voted for him. Now he was in power, he would make them pay. His monuments would be built on the rubble of their homes. A model from the time reveals the scale of the new city's layout. 60,000 flats and houses would be bulldozed. More than 100,000 people would be made homeless. Planning started in 1936, and as it moved into construction, Speer was given unprecedented freedom.
As Inspector General of Building, Speer was not only independent of the state in many ways, but he was also in charge of a huge bureaucracy. This was dozens, if not thousands of people.
Central to Hitler's plans was the building of the Reich Chancellery, part palace, part administrative center, a lavish setting where he could impress visitors.
The Reichschancellery was all about showing a very dominant Hitler to foreign dignitaries and foreign diplomats.
Speer had just 12 months to construct the building. It would take 4,500 men working round the clock in 3 shifts. They finished with just 2 days.